it completely melts the heart. Where in bhava, the heart only began to melt with certain desires. Ruchi bish chitta mashanya krip. Here, there's a complete melting of the heart and a profound transformation of one's I and mind, which was previously connected to, body and so on, the material world. Now it's completely connected to Krishna. The intrinsic characteristics of that uniquely identify prema bhakti is Sandrananda Visheshatma. Sandrananda Vishesha means is this, condensed bliss. And also, Sandrananda, condensed bliss. And also Sri Krishna Akarshani. It forcibly, practically, attracts Krishna and his associates. This is essentially what we heard about the subject matter. After that, we heard how prema, the language I was using to describe it, is like a polarity engine. It generates in the person who experiences it these contradictory qualities that don't cancel each other out. For example, just like hunger is canceled out by eating food, and the absence of food makes one hungry. But in prema, there's this intense hunger for the darshan of Krishna. So that hunger is experienced as a great anxiety, a profound eagerness. You can just basically call it a separation. And then one gets to meet Krishna, and that relieves one, but then also simultaneously increases the hunger. And that way, there's this sort of polarity engine, like riding the bicycle. When one pedal goes down, the other pedal goes up. So there's this play of basically Vipralamba and Sambhoga, separation and meeting of Krishna, that's driving all the emotional states of the Premi Bhakta. The separation is said to be worse than the poison that was generated from the ocean of milk, which is inconceivable. And of course, the bliss is, more profound than the combination of all the nectar available in all the universes combined, which is itself unlimited. So the condition of prema is basically ineffable, or you can say words cannot really describe it, the subjective experience, or else not enough can be said about it. But really, it's without the experience of prema, one can only imagine, and not even what this experience is like. And yet the authors are trying to give some explanation of it. So that's where we left off. Now he wants to describe the darshan, what it is like to get the darshan of the Supreme Lord. So in Bhav Bhakti, we hear there's a spurti, there's a vision of the Supreme Lord as soon as one begins to meditate. But in prema, there's an actual darshan that's experienced very viscerally with one's, transcendental senses. Just like Srila Prabhupada would be asked many times, are you seeing Krishna? And he would just say yes on many occasions. And on one occasion, the devotee tried to, the reporter is asking this question, and Prabhupada responds, yes. And the disciple trying, what he means is that this is Krishna's energy, and the energy is not different from Krishna, so he's seeing Krishna everywhere. And Prabhupada said, no, just as I'm seeing you, I'm seeing Krishna. It's a very central experience. So before we get into Sri Vishwanath's breakdown of that experience, which more or less I'm just going to read, not much can be said about it subjectively, having not yet experienced Prema Bhakti. But it looks like Sri Vishwanath's description follows a particular either verse from Govinda Lilamrita or a particular explanation of what it's like to experience the darshan of Krishna from Chaitanya Charitamrita Untitled Chapter 15. So I wanted to share this description with you all because it's mad beautiful. And as I mentioned last week, because of the heart being super hard, Tarashmasaram Hridayabhitedam, that is the main condition of being a conditioned soul, just the lack of softness of heart particularly towards Krishna. Of course, in Kali Yuga, just like an atrophy of affections in general, but particularly towards Krishna. Because of that, even amongst sadhakas, there's a tendency to not allow ourselves the opportunity to be attracted to the topics of love. We prefer a philosophical point, which we can then use for our own purposes, such as gaining peace or free from anxiety and so on. Even that is wrong. And the knowledge of Krishna, the knowledge of transcendence is meant to be surrendered to. It is not like mundane knowledge. In mundane knowledge, you are the subject and the knowledge is the object, and you can just use it for your own purposes, right? But in spiritual knowledge, you're supposed to be the object in relationship to that knowledge, which is the subject or the super subject. So we stand as objects in relation to that knowledge. We are meant to serve that knowledge. Not that, oh, I don't see the practical point here. Therefore, what is the use of this for where I am at? Now, obviously, because prema is our prayojan, nobody will say, what is the use of this? But there will be a tendency to like check out internally. Oh, this is too high. This is beyond me. And in this way, we don't allow ourselves the opportunity to be attracted by the descriptions of love, which is actually our only hope in gaining the appreciation that will allow us to pursue it. Because it is transcendence, adokshaja. The only way we can have access to the transcendence in the state of ignorance is through the ears. That is our only hope. Tam bhakti yoga pari bhavita hrit saroja ase shruta ikshitapata nanunata pungsam. Shruta ikshitapata. This is our path. First you hear, and then from hearing you ikshita. Then you can see, have darshan of the Lord. This is the path. Without that hearing, then there will be no hope whatsoever for gaining the idea or the ideal that will transform our existence. You know, one time, Srila Sridhar Maharaj, Srila Prabhupada's godbrother, he said that a man should be judged not by who he is now, but by his ideal, because that he will become in the movement of time. So even if a person is, you know, whatever he is now, the real question is, what is his ideal? So how do you get an ideal? Means an ideal that you really embrace, not just like, oh, hey, this is the ideal of our tradition. This is what we say, but in your heart, you've not yet embraced it. So the only way we can get a chance to embrace the ideal is if we allow ourselves a chance to get attracted to the such topics of love. We mentioned this last week. And I want to say that because in the Anshalila, it's just basically descriptions of love. So, it's the reason, the actual reason why Kaviraj Goswami has composed the Chaitanya Charitamrita in his own words. The only reason for writing this book was the Anshalila of Mahaprabhu's pastimes. So very important. Anyway, that's just like a little preamble. I just wanted to read this because Sri Vishwanath's description of Madhurya Kadambini appears to follow more or less the description here. And it is very sweet. So I'm going to read a little bit here. Don't mind. Try to follow along. I know reading can be, hearing itself is already hard enough, but when a person starts reading, then the tendency for checking out is even more profound. But try to hear this because it's very wonderful. So I'm just going to read starting from the first verse, and we'll read a little bit. It's very beautiful. So the ocean of ecstatic love for Krishna is very difficult to understand, even for such demigods as Lord Brahma. By enacting his pastimes, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu submerged himself in that ocean, and his heart was absorbed in that love. Thus he exhibited in various ways the exalted position of transcendental love for Krishna. Okay. All glories to Sri Krishna Chaitanya. All glories to Lord Nityananda, whose body is always filled with transcendental bliss. All glories to Sri Advaita Acharya, who is very dear to Lord Chaitanya. And all glories to all the devotees of the Lord, headed by Srivas Thakur. Thus, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu forgot himself throughout the entire day and night, being merged in an ocean of ecstatic love for Krishna. The Lord would maintain himself in three states of consciousness. Sometimes he merged totally in ecstatic emotion. Sometimes he was in partial external consciousness. and sometimes he was in full external consciousness. Actually, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was always merged in ecstatic emotion, but just as a potter's wheel turns without the potter's touching it, the Lord's bodily activities like bathing, going to the temple to see Lord Jagannath, and taking lunch went on automatically. One day, while Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was looking at Lord Jagannath in the temple, Lord Jagannath appeared to be personally Sri Krishna, the son of Nanda Maharaj. When Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu realized Lord Jagannath to be Krishna himself, Lord Chaitanya's 5 senses immediately became absorbed in attraction for the 5 attributes of Lord Krishna. Right? So just as in a tug of war, the single mind of Lord Chaitanya was attracted in 5 directions by the 5 transcendental attributes of Lord Krishna. Thus, the Lord became unconscious. This is just a quick note here. There are a couple of verses in the Bhagavatam, one in Prahlad Stava and later in the 24 Gurus of the Avadut Brahmin, that describe the senses as co-wives, sapatna. The co-wife the word is used, sapatna, it also means like an enemy. So the co-wife was considered an enemy. And so each of the senses are pulling the husband in another direction. And that way they destroy him. So there's somewhat of a similar comparison. All of Mahaprabhu's senses are attracted by Krishna's attributes. So the eyes are attracted by Krishna's form, the nose by Krishna's scent, the tongue to taste Krishna, and so on. And they're like, there's one mind and is being pulled in different directions by the senses. And that way, the Lord will experience unconsciousness. So anyway, try to hold that analogy in the mind. It's going to get very nice here. Just then, the Upala Bhog ceremony of Lord Jagannath concluded, and the devotees who had accompanied Lord Chaitanya to the temple took him back home. That night, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was attended by Swarup Damodar Goswami and Ramananda Rai. Keeping his hands around their necks, the Lord began to lament. When Srimati Radharani was very much agitated due to feeling great separation from Krishna, she spoke a verse to Vishaka, explaining the cause of her great anxiety and restlessness. Reciting that verse, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu expressed his burning emotions. Then, with great lamentation, he explained the verse to Swarup Damodar and Ramananda Rai. So here's the verse. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu said, though the hearts of the gopis are like high standing hills, they are inundated by the waves of the nectarian ocean of Krishna's beauty. His sweet voice enters their ears and gives them transcendental bliss. The touch of his body is cooler than millions and millions of moons together, and the nectar of his bodily fragrance overfloods the entire world. Oh, my dear friend, that Krishna, who is the son of Nanda Maharaj and whose lips are exactly like nectar, is attracting my 5 senses by force. All right, now Mahaprabhu was going to give the purport here. So we read a little bit more here. It's very nice. Lord Shri Krishna's beauty, the sound of his words and the vibration of his flute, his touch, his fragrance, and the taste of his lips are full of an indescribable sweetness. When all these features attract my 5 senses at once, my senses all ride together on the single horse of my mind, but want to go in different directions. Oh, my dear friend, please hear the cause of my misery. My 5 senses are actually extravagant rogues. They know very well that Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, but they still want to plunder Krishna's property. My mind is just like a single horse being ridden by the 5 senses of perception, headed by sight. Each of my senses wants to ride that horse, and thus they pull my mind in 5 directions simultaneously. In what direction will it go? If they all pull at one time, certainly the horse will lose its life. How can I tolerate this atrocity? My dear friend, if you say, just try to control your senses, what shall I say? I cannot become angry at my senses. Is it their fault? Krishna's beauty, sound, touch, fragrance, and taste are by nature extremely attractive. These 5 features are attracting my senses, and each wants to drag my mind in a different direction. In this way, the life of my mind is in great danger, just like a horse ridden in 5 directions at once. Thus, I am also in danger of dying. The consciousness of each woman within the 3 worlds is certainly like a high hill, but the sweetness of Krishna's beauty is like an ocean. Even a drop of water from the ocean can flood the entire world, from that ocean can flood the entire world and submerge all the high hills of consciousness. The sweetness of Krishna's joking words plays indescribable havoc with the hearts of all women. His words bind a woman's ear to the qualities of their sweetness. Thus, there is a tug of war in the life of the ears, the parts. Krishna's transcendental body is so cool that it cannot be compared even to sandalwood pulp or to millions upon millions of moons. It expertly attracts the breast of all women, which resemble high hills. Indeed, the transcendental body of Krishna attracts the minds of all women within 3 worlds. The fragrance of Krishna's body is more maddening than the aroma of musk, and it surpasses the fragrance of the bluish lotus flower. It enters the nostrils of all women of the world, and making a nest there, thus attracts them. Krishna's lips are so sweet when combined with the camphor of his gentle smile that they attract the minds of all women, forcing them to give up all their attractions. The sweetness of Krishna's smile, if the sweetness of Krishna's smile is unobtainable, great mental difficulties and lamentation result. That sweetness is the only wealth of the gopis of Vrindavan. Okay. After speaking in this way, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu caught hold of the necks of Ramananda Roy and Swarup Damodar. Then the Lord said, "My dear friends, please listen to me. What shall I do? Where shall I go? Where can I go to get Krishna? Please, both of you tell me, how can I find him?" Thus absorbed in transcendental pain, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu lamented day after day in the company of Swarup Damodar, Goswami, and Ramananda Roy. Isn't that a very sweet description? All right. So let's look at this description of Sri Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur describing the darshan of the Supreme Lord. Okay, so here goes. And this is a little bit more reading here, but you'll see how it kind of echoes what we just heard from Chaitanya Charitamrita. When this first arises, hold on, what is this? Okay, I'm just going to start from the last sentence of this previous statement here. So the bliss a devotee enjoys at that time can only be slightly compared to the bliss of a traveler. This is when he gets darshan of Krishna. On a sun-stricken desert road, feels when he comes to the cooling shade of the dense foliage provided by a thick banyan tree, and takes shelter of a shore washed by hundreds of jugs of cool celestial Ganges water. Or a forest elephant who is constantly tormented by a forest fire feels when he is showered by an unending stream of water. Or a person who is afflicted by hundreds of elements and who is very greedy for taste feels when he suddenly gets sweet nectar to drink. Okay, so it's finally taking darshan of Krishna is like a very sweet experience. Okay, when this first arises, the Lord reveals his own sweetness to the eyes of the greatly astonished devotee. This sweetness turns all the senses and the mind of the devotee into eyes. So like all the senses function as eyes now. Then obstacles in the form of paralysis, shivering, and tears in the eyes appear, and the devotee may faint of ecstasy. Yeah, so first Krishna reveals his form, his beauty, his form. And so all the senses become like eyes so it can drink in all that beauty. Otherwise, with 2 eyes, how much you can drink in. But if all the senses become like eyes and function that way, they can drink in the full beauty of Krishna. And then he faints due to this ecstatic experience. In order to wake that devotee up, the Lord fills up his nostrils with his second sweetness, his fragrance. Then the devotee's senses all turn into noses, and the devotee faints for the second time. So all the senses become noses for fully drinking the beauty of. And then again, he faints. Then the Lord then calls him and saying, "Oh, my devotee, I am now fully subdued by you. Don't be upset and just experience my sweetness." In this way, the Lord appeared to the devotee's ears with his third sweetness, his beautiful voice. When this beautiful voice appears, all the devotee's senses turn into ears, and the devotee faints in ecstasy as before. Then the Lord gives him the touch of his divine lotus feet, lotus hands, chest, etc., and thus gives him his fourth sweetness, his tender touch. The Lord gives his devotees that are in the mood of a servant the touch of his feet on their heads, his devotees that are in the mood of his friends the touch of his lotus hands in their hands, the devotees that are in the mood of his parents the touch of his tears that they wipe out of his tear-filled eyes, and his devotees that have an amorous attitude toward him the touch of his breast on their breasts and the touch of his arms that embrace them. In this way, he touches his devotees in different ways. You know, and just as a quick sidebar, in Christianity, I remember growing up hearing this, especially in the Black church, you know, he or she has been touched by God. You know, maybe usually, especially in like Black churches, they would like start speaking in tongues, like some weird language. And it's kind of wild. I'm sure they have YouTube videos of these things. Anyway, here we're hearing what it means to be touched by God. And when touch, all the senses become like the tactile sense to fully relish that experience of being touched by God. Okay. Again, at the beginning of the fourth great swoon, the Lord shows his fifth sweetness. The taste of the nectar of his lips becomes perceivable to the devotee's tongue. But this he reveals only to those who are in an amorous relationship with him, not to any other devotee. After that, just like in the previous times, the ecstatic swoon is very deep. There being no other way to awaken him, and so the devotee keeps fainting, right? This is also the suggestion of Srimad Bhagavatam. Pibata Bhagavatam Rasamalaya Muhura Ho Rasika Bhuvi Bhavaka. You should drink this Bhagavatam until there is Pibata Bhagavatam Rasam Alayam. So drink this Bhagavatam, which is rasa, until there is alayam. So alayam can mean liberation, but in one of the commentaries, they take the word alayam to be pralaya, the 8 satvika bhava, which means fainting. So one should drink this Bhagavatam until one faints. So this, of course, is only experienced in prema. Drink this Bhagavatam until you faint, and then when you come to, again, drink it. Drink until you drop. Srimad Bhagavatam was the first to encourage this sort of behavior. Okay. There being no other way to awaken him, the Lord reveals his sixth sweetness, his generosity. This is the state where all the Lord's attributes like beauty forcefully manifest simultaneously to the devotee's senses like the eyes. At that time, prema gets the hint from the Lord's to increase immediately, and this accordingly, thus accordingly increases the devotee's sacred thirst. Prema thus becomes like the moon, simultaneously creating hundreds of waves on the ocean of the devotee's ecstasy and causing friction that is deeply striking. The moon being the presiding deity of the mind, prema revives the heart of the loving devotee and extends its power over him in such a way that the devotee can relish all these attributes simultaneously without hindrance. It is not proper to suggest that it is not possible for the devotee's mind to be so divided that it can relish many subjects at the same time. Rather, on the strength of the Lord's inconceivable potency, he extends an unprecedented wonder so that the devotee's aggregate of senses turn into eyes, ears, etc. at the same time to make this relish very deep and blissful. Such an inconceivable thing is not perceived through mundane logic. It is to be experienced only. The scriptures say that one should not falsely argue over inconceivable matters. Far out. So the devotee is again fainted. So now Krishna manifests his quality of generosity. So the generousness here is Krishna wants him to experience the full intake of the Madhurya that is in him through all the senses. Usually what happens with sense gratification is that your first of all, the mind has to connect to a particular sense in order for that sense to offer the full amount of information available. So in other words, like if you're looking at something, but your mind is not focused on the sense of sight, then you don't actually perceive what you're looking at, or you don't get the full amount of information of what you're looking at. That is actually called as pramad, right? There are 4 defects of the conditioned soul. One of them is called pramad, which means inattention. So that happens a lot when people are hearing or seeing or talking, whatever. Their minds are not focused on that particular sense, so it doesn't get the full information. They make mistakes due to inattention. So that's what we usually translate as they making mistakes. It's due to inattention. So when you're doing sense gratification, you usually zoom in on one particular sense. So like if you're eating, for example, although you're seeing and you're touching and you're tasting, the mind usually like zooms in on that taste part. And so you're really experiencing like the full amount of information from the tongue and less from the eyes and from the tactile sense and so on. But here in Prema, Krishna wants him to taste the full Madhurya that's available in him. He wants his devotee to be able to taste that. So Prema, getting the hint from the Supreme Lord, becomes like a great moon in the devotee's heart. And the devotee's love, which is compared to an ocean of ecstasy, is moved by the moon, right? Because the moon, I guess, controls the movements of the waves in the ocean. So it creates this intensity in the devotee. And then suddenly, due to the sort of expansion of the moon of Prema, the devotee, through the Lord's inconceivable potency, is able to drink in the full sweetness of the Lord, because his whole being becomes like all of his senses simultaneously. So his whole being becomes like eyes, becomes like ears, etc., simultaneously. And that way he's able to drink in fully the sweetness that is in the Supreme Lord. Obviously, there's no question of doubting. There's no question of questioning this. You can accept or reject, but it is inconceivable. So Sri Vishwanath ends the description by saying, in matters that are inconceivable, logic has no place. So anyway, this is the ecstatic experience of Darshan. So hearing this is still the same description, but it zooms in on a particular quality of the Lord. After that, the devotee becomes like a chataka bird, eager to relish all the Lord's sweetness at once, but he fails to catch even a raindrop in his beak. Right. So the Lord wants him to drink the full Madhurya. He's performed this magic where the devotee's being becomes like all the senses manifest simultaneously and able to drink in everything. So the devotee is now compared to a Chatika bird. Chatika bird only takes water from the rain cloud. He will not take water from anywhere else. Oh my God, I was just reading this last night with the Bhai Prabhu. We've been reading from his Guru Maharaj's book, Rasa Panchadhyayi. And maybe I'll come back to this. This is getting a little bit off. But the gopis were compared to Chataki birds. Sri Vishwanath gave this amazing, oh my God, I want to read it. Okay, let me stay on track here. Maybe we'll come back to it if you want to hear a very nice analogy here. So how much rainwater can the Chataki bird is very small, and he has very small beak. So if the cloud is raining, so much rain is coming, how much he can drink. So the Lord is raining down all this Madhurya, and the Chataki bird, he wants to drink all of it, but how much he can drink, he's so small. So the Lord, seeing this, he thinks to himself, "Aho, I'm having so much sweetness in me." And he extends his 7th sweetness, his compassion, to let the devotee relish all of his sweetness at once. So the Lord was being generous. He said, take all of this, but how much can you take? Just like we have this saying in our little community, if Krishna wants to take away with his 10 hands, what can you hold with your 2? And if Krishna wants to give with his 10 hands, what can you receive with just the 2 hands? So generosity must be combined with compassion. Otherwise, you cannot do anything. You cannot receive the full gift without compassion coming to aid and the reception of the generous gifts of the Lord. This is all really poetry in one sense, because if love can be expressed whatsoever, it's very hard to express it. But if it can be expressed whatsoever, you need poetry to do it. That's why this kavi quality, 26 qualities of a devotee, the 26th one Mahaprabhu mentions is a devotee is a kavi. Because if you have to express love, poetry is the only hope at being able to capture a sense of what it is. There's no other hope. Just like if you fall in love with someone, then if you have to express your love for them, you will use the poetry. You may say, I love you. Well, like what? And then you'll say, I love you like that. And then you make some poetry up. So this is all poetry really in one sense to help us understand or get a sense or something to get inspired by what the experience of true love would be like. Okay. So the Lord has manifested his compassion quality now. This is the empress of all the Lord's energies in the middle of the lotus, on whose 8 surrounding petals are the 8 energies, like Vimala Ukarshini, that are mentioned in the Agama scriptures. So Agama means like the tantric literatures. Those are the literatures that are connected with like ritual and ceremony, worship, where there's just like deity worship is an example of a tantric practice that we have in Bhakti Yoga. And so when you're worshiping the deity, particularly when you're worshiping, on the altar before there's Shringar, Darshan, the Lord, and so on, you make like a little altar. Usually you make a yantra actually. And the yantra, there's like a circle with a hexagram, or Star David. And then it's surrounded by petals. And each of these petals, anyway, the yantra is itself considered like the form of the Lord, basically, like a form. And the mantra is like the soul for that. So there's so many mantras that are chanted. In any case, so this form of the Lord is manifested, and the Lord is Purna, so he's complete when he is accompanied by his Shaktis. So this yantra is there, and there are 8 petals that represent different Shaktis. Vimala means purity, and so on. There are different petals there. And in the middle of that lotus petal, there's the Lord's 9th Shakti, which is the most important one, his Anugraha. The compassion towards a devotee is also called Anugraha and manifests itself in the Lord's lotus eyes. So out of these Shaktis, this Anugraha is the chief Shakti. And here Sri Vishnu says it is manifest in the Lord's eyes. That's why the devotees are always asking the Lord to please glance upon me. They're begging for that kripa, because that kripa is there in his eyes. And like Lord Jagannath's eyes has this big redness around it. So that redness is that Anugraha Shakti. So to the Lord's devotees who approach him in the mood of a servant, it appears as Kripa Shakti. And to his other devotees, either as Vatsalya or Karunya. When it appears to devotees in an amorous mood, it is called Chitta, Vidravini, or Karshini Shakti, melting Krishna's heart and attracting him. Thus, it appears in different names. By this Kripa Shakti, the Lord's all-pervading willpower delights the hearts of the sadhus with raga and greatly astonishes even fully realized self-satisfied souls like the Kumars or Shukadeva Goswami. They also got attracted to the Lord. Being subdued by this Kripa Shakti, the Lord's attribute named affection for his devotees rules like an emperor over all his other auspicious attributes, like truthfulness and cleanliness that are mentioned by Mother Earth in the first canto of the Bhagavata. Just glossing over this, if you go to the first canto, when Dharani, the earth, is having conversation with Dharma, the bull. So there she mentions a long list of Krishna's qualities. Truthfulness, tolerance, so many qualities. I think she mentions 40 of them in that list that she gives. So here Sri Vishwanath is pointing out that out of all these qualities, his Bhakta Vatsalya, which means affection to devotees, is the chief quality. Because this Bhakta Vatsalya quality has been subdued by Kripa Shakti. In other words, without this quality, the value of all the other qualities become almost like zeros. But all these zeros, the Lord is never a zero, just as just a crude analogy. But all these qualities become relishable because of the one of the quality of Bhakta Vatsalya, on this kripa that he manifests towards his devotees. So an example of this is being given actually to demonstrate this. Sri Vishnav points this out. This is a verse from, I forget which Shastra this is from. Delusion, drowsiness, mistakes, cruelty. Just as I read this, just think about how many of these qualities you have, all right? Just you can make a little check mark. How many of these qualities do I have? Delusion, drowsiness, mistakes, cruelty, intense lust, restlessness, intoxication, envy, violence, sorrow, fatigue, untruth, anger, desire, anxiety, universal folly. I don't even know what that means. This sounds funny. Partiality and dependence on others. These are the 18 faults. The scriptures proclaim that these 18 faults do not exist in the Lord. Although these faults are completely out of bounds for the Lord, on the request of the attribute of compassion, kripa, they can sometimes be found in avatars like Rama and Krishna and are experienced as such by their devotees. So Rama, for example, becomes bewildered when Sita is taken and starts crying in sorrow, right, due to separation. And in Krishna's Leelas, there's so many of these qualities manifest. So the commentators, they show that Krishna has 16 of these 18 faults, and they show places in the Bhagavatam where Krishna is manifesting these apparently bad qualities. There are bad qualities in the conditioned souls, but in Krishna, they become wonderful qualities due to the Kripa Shakti combined with the Bhakta Vatsalya quality of the Lord. So this is what he wants to say. These so-called faults become great virtues instead in avatars like Rama and Krishna. They are extended by the Lord for the relish of his devotees. To completely relish the beauty and other attributes of the Lord, the enlivened devotee savors them over and over again to his supreme astonishment. His heart melts when he repeatedly contemplates the Lord's unprecedented affection for his devotees. A good example of this, like there are plenty of places, but I'm just thinking of Srila Prabhupada's purport in the first canto, chapter 8, when Krishna saves the Pandavas from the attack of Ashwatthama's chakra, Brahmastra weapon. This is the second time Ashwatthama has thrown this weapon, but this time the Pandavas didn't have enough time to respond to counteract it, so they were in great danger. So Krishna immediately summoned his chakra and just dissipated it. So technically, this is considered as a transgression of his vow. He is untruthful. He took a vow he would not participate in the war, and then immediately he's breaking the vow. So there, Prabhupada writes in his purport to this verse that Krishna, it was more important for Krishna to be remembered as Bhakta Vatsalya, one who was always, by the side of his devotees, and not as a strict moralist who never breaks his solemn vow. And when you hear that, it's very attractive, actually, for a bhakta. For a bhakta, this is very attractive. So this is what he wants to say. Why does Bhakta Vatsalya quality is the king attribute? So this is being used as a sort of reference. All these qualities which are ordinarily faults become virtues in the Supreme Lord because of the Anugraha Shakti, which is manifest in relationship to his devotees. And it becomes part of the rasa that makes attainment of Rasa Sarup Krishna so wonderful. Okay, so there's something about Prema Bhakti. I think he's going to close it out here. These two verses just gives sort of a conversation, that an exchange that happens with the Lord and his devotee after the devotee is able to come to consciousness. So I'll just read through that quickly, and then he closes out the book. So yeah, let's see. I'm gonna get through this. Okay. This one. So the Lord then tells his devotee, "O best of devotees, for many births you have given up wife, children, and wealth for my sake, and have tolerated many hardships like cold, wind, hunger, thirst, pain, and disease just to worship me. You have tolerated the insults by many people and spent your life begging. I cannot repay you in any way, and remain a debtor to you. Lordship over the world or mystic perfections do not suit you. So what can I give you? How can a human being be given animal fodder like grass or husk? Hence, although I am Ajita, the invincible, I am now conquered by you. The vine of your good conduct is now my only support. This is the base central message of the Srimad Bhagavatam. Same thing that Krishna tells the gopis, that actually my promise in Gita is that as they approach me, I reciprocate in kind. But there is no way for me to reciprocate with your bhakti. And therefore, be satisfied with your bhakti only. So the basic message of Srimad Bhagavatam is that love is its own reward. That's the basic message of the Bhagavatam. Usually everyone in the material world, they're doing something to get some other reward, right? They're going to school so they can get some degree. They get a degree so they can get, a job. They want a job so they can get money. They want money so they can acquire things. They acquire things so they can enjoy people, exploit. And the whole idea is that happiness, right? That ananda. So real ananda is premananda. And when you get that ananda, that is its own reward. You're not, once you have that, you don't have any need for anything else. So the basic message of Srimad Bhagavatam is like this, that prema is its own reward. Even God feels that he is unable to reciprocate. Even to give himself would not be sufficient. He was thinking like this. So the idea is that prema is its own reward. Just by having the prema, one feels there's nothing else in the world that is required. So the devotee hearing this from the Lord takes these very gentle and sweet words as ear ornaments and says, "O Lord, O Master, O ocean of compassion, you see how I have fallen in the dreadful ocean of material existence and am being torn apart by its resident crocodiles. This has made your butter-like soft heart melt. So you now assume the supernatural form of Sri Guru and give your darshan, which is like the Sudarshan disc that tears apart the ignorance of lust, and thus releases me from their terrible teeth. Now you make the syllables of your mantra into the path of my ears, so that my pain is extinguished and you can engage me as a maidservant at your lotus feet. You repeatedly purify me by allowing me to hear, chant, and remember your holy attributes and names. However, although you bestowed the association of your devotees on me and taught me how to serve you, I am such a low fool that I cannot serve you for even one day. But although I am punishable and wicked, you still made me drink the sweetness of your darshan." Such is the humility of a Premi Bhakta. But when I hear the best of Lord say, I become a debtor to you, I become bewildered and think to myself, what shall I do? 5, 7, 8, no, 100 million offenses dwell in me. Now I consider it arrogance even to beg your pardon. I think I have committed even more than 1 trillion offenses, and each of these offenses was very grave. Let me suffer the remaining part of the reactions to them. I will not beg for an amnesty. Now I understand the offenses I committed just the other day by comparing your limbs with a fresh rain cloud, blue lotus and sapphire, your feet with the moon and your feet with fresh sprouts. It is like comparing a golden mountain with half a sesame seed, and Chintamani gem with a chickpea, a lion with a jackal, or Garuda with a fly. That was so foolish that I committed great offenses. By offering such worldly praises to the Lord, now my foolish poetry is praised by people at large. Now that I have seen your divine form with my very eyes for even a fraction of a second, I understand that my words of comparison are like the teeth of a restless, chased up cow, thus tried to pollute the wish-yielding vine of your beauty, but wasn't able to. So yeah, he, before seeing the Lord, he wrote poetry saying the Lord is like this, like that. Now he's remembering that now he's had darshan of the Lord, and it's like, oh my God, these comparisons are so offensive, and he's feeling guilty about that. But now in the material world, people have embraced his poetry. They're also singing it and repeating it. So in this way, he's contaminated the world. So the devotee is thinking like this, it seems, in prema bhakti, and he's feeling very embarrassed. And this way, the devotee laments in many ways, and the Lord is very pleased with him and shows him as far as possible. And according to the devotee's own mood, like the amorous one, the super excellent Rasik Sri Vrindavan, the wish yielding trees, the great yoga pit, the daughter of Sri Vishabhanu, his most beloved, her girlfriends like Sri Lalita, her maidservants, his friends like Sri Subhal, his cows that are herded by him, Sri Jamuna, Sri Govardhan, the Bandita tree, Mount Nandishwara, his mother, father, brother, friends, servants, and maidservants that dwell there, and all the other Brijbasis that are so excellent due to his enjoyments. When a devotee is thus wholly immersed in the river of fascination, the Lord and his associates suddenly disappear. Right? Because we heard Prema, Sri Krishna Akarshani, it attracts Krishna and his associates. So Krishna gives that darshan, then again, he's disappearing. And then again, the devotee laments. And that's the polarity engine that we already talked about. And this way, we can only fathom what a premika devotee experiences. Okay, summary. This is the end of the book. Should I pause here and we can just finish it off tomorrow? Maybe we can finish it off tomorrow. Tomorrow's, of course, the first day of Kartik. I'm actually going to a festival tomorrow at Bhakta Bandav. I was kind of why I was wanting to finish today, because I think I could be able to do it. They do have some. Anyway, I think I could do it. Maybe we'll pause here and finish up the summary. The summary is kind of straightforward, but his last statements expand upon the sequence. Okay, I'm going to take questions here. Maybe we can continue afterwards. Let me see, depending on how long this takes. Let me just pause here. Okay, how to practically appreciate the CC verses when we read on Krishna's beauty. We haven't seen him, so it seems so hard. How to practically appreciate. You don't appreciate the description? Do you have to experience someone's experience in order to appreciate it? In the material world, someone describes to you their trip to the Bahamas. You have not been to the Bahamas, but they're describing it to you. You don't appreciate. So again, the lack of appreciation. You say, yes, Bahamas is good because it's a material thing. So that's what I already mentioned, that because our heart is hard, unless we see something we can exploit, then it's not as interesting to us. So that is the process of bhakti, process of softening the heart. Chitta masranya krit, samya masranato aswan. With this verse definition of prema bhakti. So appreciate, no appreciate. One should simply allow the ears to hear it, and then gradually let the heart become soft by hearing. We have to hear about love also. Otherwise, we will not be attracted to it. Just like we hear about gossip, and that way our hearts become harder and more inclined towards meanness and cutting down. Just like you see how everyone treats each other on the internet, cutting each other down, making fun of each other and so on. That's because they keep hearing like this all the time. So they're just imitating. That is natural. The mind imitates. So I guess we have to just keep hearing so our heart becomes soft and we can appreciate. Not that I have so much appreciation myself, but I think it's wonderful poetry to think about how central the experience of bhakti is and how it's been described, the senses drinking in. It's just a beautiful poetry. So some appreciation, but keep hearing and give ourselves a chance. It seems the kind of appreciation or deep feelings experienced by Chaitanya Mahaprabhu can be manifest only after darshan of the Lord, right? I'm just trying to understand that. Would there be a day when, by repeated hearing about Krishna, we will also get a point of appreciating due to genuine experience. Yeah, that is what we've been hearing this whole book, right? When you come to Ruchi, you really start to find it tasty. Shak Krishna Nama Charitadi Shita Api Avidya Pitopatasaranashanarochikan. So Srila Goswami is saying the name and charita, characteristics of Krishna is sweet like sugar candy, but due to ignorance, we find it to be very bitter. All right, what is this? This is not very interesting. So that is due to avidya. So if you keep on hearing, then that avidya ta gada root mulahantri will be completely uprooted. Then you'll be able to taste and appreciate for real from the heart. Okay. Then it says here, another question. I heard from you convincingly enough times that the Lord can't experience the pain of the conditioned souls as he has no experience of that suffering. But when residents of Breja appeal, like the verses you read, Krishna can experience their pain of separation and respond. Is it because they are pure devotees imbued with internal potency? Yeah, so their pain is not the pain of avidya, right? So our activities and our emotions are avidya karma. All right, so it is informed by the avidya, the actions of our bodies and mind, avidya karma, informed by avidya. So to that, Krishna is unaware, just as darkness cannot approach light. But the pain of the gopis is not avidya karma, right? It is samvid hladini shakti informed. So it is all bliss. That is why it's hard to understand. That the charge is saying the pain is like worse than the poison coming from the milk ocean, but it is bliss. It is a blissful lamentation. There is no comparison, honestly, in the world. But what I'm thinking is sometimes when you hear like sorrow music, sad songs, or you see some tragedy movie, and you like that experience. Of course, this is how drama works in general. You can study in Bharat Muni's Natya Shastra. But the basic idea is that drama draws you out of your own ego preoccupations into the world of the arts. And then you're drawn into the world of the arts by the word used is sahridya. Sahridya means like a sympathetic heart to a particular character in that world. And so by empathy, you kind of identify with the character, and then you can experience the emotions of the character like vicariously, and you find it relishable. So even if the play is like a tragedy, that also you find pleasure. You may even cry, but you like that crying. Just like sometimes you see a sad movie, like growing up. The only reason I'm remembering this movie now is because I went to visit a friend the other day, and when I walked into his place, he was watching Titanic, which was a very popular movie when I was growing up. And in the movie, many people cry, but they like that experience of crying. And again, they watch it so they can cry. And it's very relishable. There's some rasas there. Just like people watch horror movies also, there's some rasa there, and seeing the ghastly and Bhayankara rasa. So yeah, they're suffering, but that suffering is ananda. It is blissful. So who can understand such things without experiencing it? So otherwise the Lord would not be, yeah. If it is just suffering from the avidya, that does not. I already mentioned this the other class with Gajendra Moksha. So Gajendra is being suffering because he's being mauled by the crocodile. Finally, he offers prayers, and the Supreme Lord comes in response to his prayer, not in response to his suffering. And that suffering is mayic, but bhakti is spiritual. So in response to that spiritual, that gets his attention, not the suffering. So the response to the gopis suffering, the residents of Vrindavan suffering, is a response to their bhakti. which manifests itself in ways that may speak to us if we could see him as suffering, but it is not suffering, it is expression of bhakti. Okay. Makuna said, if there's time, please read the excerpt you mentioned about the Chattakabur. Okay. I want to hear that. It's actually very, very sweet. So we're in the part of the Rasa Leela where Krishna has called the gopis for Maharasa. And they have come, and then he's given instructions on being a proper, she's given instructions on Sri Dharma, basically. And his instructions have outer and inner meaning. The outer meaning is instructions on Sri Dharma, but their inner meaning is instructions on how to engage in the conjugal rasa. So the commentators are giving, in their commentaries, the inner real meaning of the Lord's words. But the gopis, they're thinking that he's giving some internal meaning, but the external meaning sounds very strong, like you should do your dharma to your husbands. And so they're very hurt by that. They find it to be very cruel. And finally, after the Lord speaks, the gopis are given an opportunity to respond to all his statements. And they're going to respond to each of his statements one by one. And so we were reading the first verse of the response. So I'll just read the verse and then read Sri Vishwanath's commentary to this Chataki part, which is just like so sweet. Okay, yeah, so here's a verse. The gopis said, "O omnipotent one, O dearest beloved, you are all pervading, so you know our hearts. It is not proper for you to speak such cruel words to us. We, your loving maidservants, have given up all our material attachments so that we can devote ourselves to serving your lotus feet. There is no doubt that we have no control over you because you are independent and obstinate. Still, you should reciprocate with us just as a primeval Lord, Bhagavan Narayana, mercifully fulfills the desires of those who seek liberation from this world. Do not discard us." Okay, here's this commentary. So sweet. Sri Vishwanath writes here. So after hearing Sri Krishna's rude words, the gopis became surcharged with emotions and voiced their love-filled anger. You are giving us religious instruction, yet at the same time, you are bringing a mass of sin upon yourself. This is not favorable for you. With this intention, the gopis spoke this verse starting with Maivam. O Almighty One, why are you using such harsh words and indulging in sin by murdering us? Just like a brutal killer, you have shot the arrow of your cruel words at us. This will surely bring about our death. We will give up our bodies and go to Yamaraja's abode. We will not follow your instructions to return to Braj. Oh my God, I love that comment. So they're saying you're giving instructions on dharma, but you're performing sin. So what is the sin? You're speaking these harsh words which will kill us. We will die. We will rather die. We will die and we will go to Yamaraja's abode. We will not go back home to our husbands. There are millions of us. So you'll be responsible for killing millions of us. And you will be responsible for killing millions of women. It is not proper for you to commit such a sinful act, for you are the son of Sri Nanda Maharaj, who is celebrated as a most religious person. If you do not want to perpetuate this sinful act of killing all of us, then accept us. We have given up all types of sense enjoyment and worship you exclusively. So in the same way, you should also renounce all your sense enjoyment and reciprocate with us. Here the word sarva vishaya, all sense enjoyment, is used instead of anya vishaya, other sense enjoyment. This indicates that the physical contact with Sri Bhagavan cannot be considered sense enjoyment. All right, now this is the part I was specifically speaking about that he's going to write here. This is very nice. Sri Krishna might say, "Oh, lustful women, you have rejected your husbands and are attracted to me. Have your husbands not satisfied your passion?" The gopis reply, "Hey, Duravagraha." So here, Duravagraha is understood thus. Du means full of faults, and avagraha means restricted rainfall. For example, a farmer desires rainfall, but the cloud is duravagraha. That is, it releases poison instead of water. So the gopis argued, "O cloud, you are only pouring poison. We are chatiki birds, and you are like a rain cloud. Even though far away, the cloud saves the chatikis, lies by quenching their thirst. Thus, it is their dearmost friend. So the chatikis drink only the water raining from the clouds. They do not drink water from any other source, even it may be an ocean full of nectar. We are also chatikis of the Krishna cloud only. Even if you are far from us, you are still our dearmost. But due to our misfortune, you are pouring poison, Durvagraha, and not rainwater that will quench our thirst. It is your choice if you do not agree to pour rainwater. We will not be unhappy, but you must know that we will drink this poison and accept death. We will not take anything else to quench our thirst. That is, we will not drink water from the nearby reservoir of our husbands. This is our nature. If you are even slightly inclined to show your gratitude, then don't reject us." Isn't that so sweet? It's like amazing. Okay. You are like a cloud, the Chatiki bird is you're supposed to be our friend, but now you are giving poison instead of rainwater. No mind. We'll drink this poison only, but we will not take water from any other source. That is, we will not take water from the reservoir of our husbands. We will drink this poison and we will die. So if you don't want this to happen, then don't discard us. Anyway, super sweet. It's poetry, so it's what a poetic way to express love. And if we dive into the poetry more and more, then in English, in the English world, it used to be like compulsory to learn poetry. Now, we're all ignorant now. They're teaching all these kids all sorts of nonsense. If you drop out of school and after, basically after you learn and read and write, you can drop out. If you send your kids to school, just let them drop out after they learn to read and write, because they're teaching all nonsense. But previously, you used, at least not that I lived that time, but all the movies I remember growing up seeing of like, especially like Victorian England, and they used to just know like whole passages of poetry. They could recite it on demand. And it's something about hearing poetry and being able to repeat it, even if it's not your own poetry, that does something to the heart and invites you into the world of the poet. And if you are sahridya, if you are a sympathetic heart, you can be invited into that world and you can kind of start to experience a sense of that emotive world vicariously. And that way, your own heart becomes transformed. Yeah, we've mentioned this before. There's this actor. There's this nice movie about Tukaram, an old like Hindi movie. Tukaram. All Hare Krishnas practically have seen this. At least when I joined, I saw this earlier on. And the actor who played Tukaram, he became a Vaishnav after playing that role, because he just really entered into the part. He was Sahrida, sympathetic heart. And so he started to experience the inner world of Tukaram vicariously, and that transformed him. And he became a Vaishnava. Such is the power of drama. That's why performing drama, even Krishna says in Uddhava Gita, is one of the types of sadhana in bhakti. And Braj, they used to call them Ras Leelas. They would perform the drama. And in that way, their own being will be completely transformed by that. So similarly, literature or poetry, that was the same idea, is that you're invited into the world of the poet, so that, and drawn out of your own ego preoccupation, you experience their emotions vicariously, and that transforms you. And then you become like the person with whom you associate with, right? That is a principle of association. You become like those with whom you associate. So yeah, learning poetry is nice, important. It has powerful effects. And that description just now was just like amazing. Sri Vishnacharya Thakur really getting the gold medal for that. All right, we'll finish this up tomorrow. It's already 9:20 and I actually have somewhere to go. A busy day. I gotta travel upstate. Thank you all very much. I hope you're getting some little bit of appreciation for prema. I'm trying to. It's not easy because of the hard heart, but just tell your mind to say yes. This is very much, this is our goal. This is our aspiration, and allow the mind, even though it's a little bit throwing tantrum, to appreciate. Tell the mind you like this chit, this chit shakti. Tell the mind you like this chit. Just like the non-devotees, they drink liquor, and liquor is so terrible tasting. When I was 18, on my right when I turned 18, basically, and I moved to New York. This is before I was a devotee. So I wasn't into intoxication, even as a non-devotee, like any of it. I wasn't into any type of intoxication. I go to New York and my cousin, I'm hanging out with my cousin and our roommates. And then we go to a club. So he was like, Jaya, you want a beer? And I was like, no, because I wasn't into intoxication at all, like 0%. And so he bought me a beer anyway. He said, here, I bought you a beer. I said I didn't want one. He said, no, I bought you one anyway. So he's putting all this peer pressure on me. So he's like, drink it. Because he thought, he was being a good older cousin. And this is my first time away from home. And so now I can get into naughty things. I'm becoming an adult. So thought he was being like a good caretaker, basically. So I succumbed to the peer pressure. I had a little sip of it. And I was like, oh God, this is so disgusting. So I was like, how can anyone drink this? This is terrible tasting. And he was like, it's an acquired taste. I was like, why would I want to acquire this? So the way I got out of it is I just went on the dance floor and started dancing with everyone on the dance floor. And that way I didn't drink the beer. He finished it off. So like that, because our heart is so hard, this nectar of Krishna is tasting like beer. Bitter taste is coming. It's an acquired taste. You just have to tell your mind that I like this. And just like you try to drink and you actually don't like it, but you tell the mind, we like this. We like what it does to us. We like the social aspect of it. We like it. So in the same way, we hear this Hari Katha and we tell our mind, you like this. You like this shit. It's very nice. You like it. And that way, get it accustomed to hearing more and more about Krishna. Okay, we'll stop here. Haryam Tat Sat. Shri Madhurya Kadambini ki Jai. Shri Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur ki Jai. Srila Prabhupada ki Jai. Shri Gaudiya Guru Varga ki Jai. Go Premanandi Hari Hari Bo.